Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, OP's wife goes on a business trip, and he becomes suspicious, following her with a friend. They catch her cheating on him in a hotel room and confront her. He files for divorce, and she moves out, taking some of his belongings. Later, she calls him, saying she's pregnant, but he denies responsibility, and they haven't spoken since. He refuses to support her or the affair child, and her sister asks for financial help, which he refuses. Now let's get into the story. My wife, 30 of 4 years, told me 32 she had to go on a business trip 5 hours away. That included one overnight stay. She'd never had to do this before, but she was only at this job for 9 months at the time. She told me they were so pleased with her work that they chose her to be the one to go. She would be paid to do this, and it was like a nice little getaway. Since I didn't express my enthusiasm, she added that she needed time alone to do some soul-searching. That was an odd comment. I asked her how she expected to do any soul-searching while on a 2-day business trip. She just rolled her eyes and said I was being too technical on the day of her departure. I thought about how weird it was that she said she needed alone time. My wife didn't like to be alone normally. And this town was so far away. I told my friend what was going on, and he convinced me that we should follow her. At first, my wife hesitated to tell me her hotel room number. She gave some lame excuse, but I told her it was just for safety purposes and there was no way I was going to drive 5 hours to come see her on a one-night stay. It was so funny. My friend was convinced we were going to find her in bed with someone, but I was skeptical. Pickle, of course. I couldn't think that about my wife. She wouldn't lie like that, would she? We got there around 10 p.m., way after my wife got there, worked and settled down. She texted me good night, but even that was odd. My wife usually stayed up pretty late. We went up the elevator and stood in front of her room door. Our plan was that if someone else opened the door, we were going to barge in before determining if we had the wrong room or not, because we had to prove my wife was in the room with someone before the door was shut on us. I seriously wouldn't have been this ballsy if it wasn't for my friend. He encouraged me to be brave enough to discover the truth before he knocked. I could hear moaning, but I told myself it was coming from another room. A man opened the door and we barged in while recording on our phones. My wife was lying on the bed naked, trying desperately to pull the tucked-in bedding loose to cover herself. When that failed, she jumped off to the side of the bed and ducked down low. She screamed, "For Christ's sake! I thought you were going to call me on the hotel room phone, not show up here." I had no idea what to say. I was in disbelief. My friend had a lot to say. He'd known her through me for these past 4 years, so he felt entitled to tell her what easy, worthless thing she was for cheating on me. He pointed the camera at the guy and he covered his face, grabbed his stuff, and ran down the hallway. It was like he wasn't supposed to be there and couldn't risk being discovered. My wife cried and tried to yell after him, but realized it was hopeless. She realized he didn't want to stay with her or defend her at all. She hugged her knees, crying. Sitting naked on the floor in the corner of the hotel room while being filmed, all I could think was that she deserved it. While recording, I asked her what the hell she was thinking. Who was that guy? She said she didn't want to tell me anything. She just wanted me to leave. My friend demanded answers on my behalf, telling her it was the least she could do to make up for some of my pain. She cried and said she didn't know what we wanted her to say. I told him we needed to leave. She wasn't going to say anything to make this better. On the way out, I told her she wasn't welcome to return home. She just screamed really loud in frustration. The ride home was pretty quiet. My friend apologized for what I was going through, but I told him it was thanks to him that I even knew my wife was cheating on me. We listened to some epic music and talked some more. He stayed with me at my house for a few weeks while I filed for divorce and put all my wife's stuff in the garage. I had a camera in the garage, so I didn't mind letting her type in the garage code to get her stuff. She arrived one day with a small moving truck. She was by herself while she loaded her stuff up. She didn't know about the camera I installed, so it recorded as she loaded some of the things I owned into her moving truck. These were expensive and she probably just wanted to sell them. I called her and told her I just saw her steal my stuff from the garage and she tried to play dumb. I told her to bring them back or they'd be held to petty. 3 days later, I arrived home and my things were sitting on the porch. For weeks later, she called me at 2 crying because she was filled with regret. She missed me and the life we built together. More importantly, she found out she was pregnant. I knew for sure it wasn't mine. We hadn't had intimate for 2.5 months. Now she was sleeping on the floor of her sister's apartment, because her parents wouldn't let her live with them. I told her she did this to both of us and it couldn't be fixed. I was not going to support her or the affair child. Her only choice was to keep moving forward and make better decisions from now on. She apologized to me one more time before hanging up. We haven't spoken for a long time now. I think she still lives with her sister. I started a little business and hobby with my friend and it's really taken off. I have a passion for it and it makes me money, so I'm very happy. My ex's sister tried asking me for some help with rent and baby expenses because somehow it was my fault. The responsibility of my ex fell onto her. I guess that's an indication that my ex isn't in a hurry to get back to work. I just laughed at the request for money. I understand times are tough, but I refuse to help support that lying, cheating woman. Today's second story. In this story, Opie recounts how his wife's behavior changed drastically. They were trying to conceive a child, but she began a discreet relationship with their neighbor, whom Opie refers to as Noper. Signs of her infidelity include secretive phone use, avoiding eye contact, and leaving a 4th of July barbecue with Noper. Opie sets up a hidden security camera that reveals his wife visiting Noper's apartment multiple times. Now let's get into the story. I'm going to tell you all about how my wife went from the considerate woman I knew to someone who would go behind my back for short-lived pleasure. I hate that this happened to me, but all things considered, I'm grateful it didn't turn out worse. We were both 27 and married for 4 years when things started to change. We decided to start trying to conceive a child, and she simultaneously decided to start a discreet relationship with our neighbor. Whenever we were leaving or coming to our apartment, we had to walk past his front door. We saw him in passing many times, but my wife never let her eyes stay on him too long. He was tall with dreadlocks and I guess handsome, but I don't really want to say that. She went out to the car for something one night, and the next day she started checking her phone a lot. I think she left a note on his car with her phone number. Besides checking her phone a lot, she was really jumpy and defensive. I mentioned that we were invited to a July 4th barbecue that some of the neighbors were hosting. She stopped what she was doing and said she assumed I wouldn't want to go. I knew she was doing this because she wanted to go, hopefully without me there. I told her I would go with her if she wanted, and she said she didn't want to be the only reason I was going. You know the stupid, tricky way that women reel men into arguing. I put my hands up and said, "If you want to go, tell me when we're leaving," and walked away. At the July 4th barbecue, the neighbor man will call. Noper was there. I'm quite sure she was texting him at this point and told him she'd be there. He did a really good job of playing dumb. Like, he picked the chair next to my wife at random. It was like they both underestimated how observant I was. I already decided at this point that our relationship was in trouble, and if I couldn't reach her before she cheated on me, all hope was lost. We all chatted outside over the music coming from someone's Bluetooth speaker. My wife paid me no attention beyond the occasional glance to make sure I was still there. She was busy gabbing her mouth about pointless stuff, mostly directing her attention to Noper but including other neighbors so I wouldn't catch on. I tried telling her I was ready to leave, but since she didn't want to stop talking, she suggested I head back to the apartment without her. I tried staying longer, but I had to go back. I was tired. I finally gave in and went back inside. By the time I got to the window to look outside, Noper and my wife were gone. I went to his apartment and knocked on the door. He took almost a full minute to answer, and that bothered me. When he opened the door, my wife was obviously not in sight. He was dressed, but it wasn't the same outfit he had on 15 minutes ago. I knew it was a long shot because I had no proof, but I asked him if my wife was with him. He tried to look confused and said no. I asked if he was sure because she texted me that she was going to hang out with him for a while. This was a lie, but with a very perplexed expression on his face. He looked towards his bedroom. For a split second, I knew she was in there. He told me again, but slower, that she was not in his apartment. I stared at him real hard for a few moments, then walked away without another word. Before my wife even returned to our apartment, I ordered a hidden security camera to install outside our front door. When she returned, she looked flushed and avoided eye contact with me. I tried asking where she was, and just like before, she got defensive and told me I was crazy. She said she walked around outside while she ate another serving of food. Then she got caught up with the neighborhood gossip spreader. I knew she was lying. I didn't believe her at all. But it wasn't because I had proof. It was because I knew my wife's personality and that she was acting guilty. Before the obsession with her phone and constantly defensive demeanor, she would always communicate with me. Even if it was just her crazy and pointless thoughts, she would share them with me. If something was upsetting her, she would tell me. It was unlikely that she suddenly stopped having thoughts or complaints worth sharing with her husband. It was much more likely that she didn't feel like including me for one reason or another, and maybe that was because she had a fling going on. I called her brother to ask what I should do. He didn't think his sister would be capable of something like this because all she ever wanted was a happy marriage without betrayal. After I told him more of the signs I noticed, he suggested I wait until the security camera catches something before making any decisions. I agreed. After this conversation, I waited weeks for my wife to make up a reason to leave the apartment. Both of us worked from home and we usually went places together. She never did leave the apartment without me. I finally decided to check what the security camera caught. It was showing Noper's front door and our own. Eventually, I saw at 3 a.m. my wife leaving the apartment. I could not believe my eyes. She was moving very slowly, being careful not to make a single sound. She tiptoed down to Noper's door and knocked. He answered within 10 seconds and let her in. I was furious. I sent the clip to her brother and he replied with absolute shock. My wife never knew about the camera, and it was so small that she didn't see it. She didn't stop. At one visit, the camera caught 3 times in 2.5 weeks. I told her brother about the additional clips, asking him what I should do. I was at a loss. Their parents had since passed, and I wasn't sure how I could get her to move out of the apartment without putting up a fight. He offered to come over while I dumped her, and I accepted. He showed up and she was confused. I told her I had proof of her sneaking to Nobra's apartment and I would no longer consider myself married to her. Her jaw dropped. She started trembling and swore she would never do that. She was already less defensive than normal because her brother was there. I asked her if she wanted to see the video evidence and she said yes. After watching it, she was silent. She had a very angry expression, but the only person she could have been mad at was herself. We tried talking to her more, but she was only silently fuming. Eventually, she stormed into the bedroom and packed a bag. I thought she was preparing to move out, but she only grabbed enough for a few days. She walked straight past us, out the door, and into Noper's apartment without knocking. Her brother and I stared at each other in disbelief. He helped me move all her stuff into the hallway of our apartment complex. I was actually pretty amused picturing her attempting to bring all this stuff into Nobra's apartment like it wasn't a big deal. Over the course of a week, she managed to get half of her stuff into his apartment before he told her he changed his mind and didn't want her to stay with him anymore. This is when reality really sunk in. She called her brother and asked him if she could move in. He said no. Besides the fact that he disapproved of her behavior, he wasn't permitted to let anyone move in. Then she called me. She didn't know I had enough time to update the landlord that she'd moved out. She begged me to forgive her. She said this was the worst mistake she ever made and she would do anything to make it better. I told her I would never be able to look at her the same way. I told her I'd always worry she was sneaking over to the neighbor's house or searching for someone to cheat with online. She cried and said more, but I had to hang up. 1 month later, she was still homeless. Most of the stuff I put in the hallway was already in the garbage. She would sleep outside on the bus or at strangers' houses. She managed to work a little bit, but not enough to afford a place to live or frequent hotel rooms. I felt bad, but she brought it all on herself. To help myself cope, I completely redecorated my apartment and had lots of friends over. Nobra left a note on my door apologizing. He contributed to the disaster, but it was mostly my ex's choices. 1 year later, we were officially divorced, and I got the opportunity to move to Hawaii. I work from my home or the beach and started dating a really lovely woman. My ex did manage to find a place to live with a man she met on the bus. Her brother updates me, and according to him, she is not happy. She's learned that beggars can't be choosers, and now she only focuses on survival.